G'day everyone, and welcome to Pello Talk. I'm Dave Pello, and on this special episode of Pello Talk, we're going to be having a look at preferential voting. It's March 2020, and the Queensland local government elections are coming up in just a matter of weeks, the 28th of March. And I've seen a lot of advertising around telling people to just vote one. Now, this is candidates doing, and obviously they're going to tell you what suits them best. And if you don't know how to use the democratic system, the electoral system, how to vote, information about other candidates, if you haven't done your homework and thought for yourself, then sure, trust your favorite candidate or political party and vote exactly how they tell you to. It's better than nothing else at all. But you know what? Put a bit of effort in and actually figure out what does differentiate all the candidates from the others, what their policies are, what their platforms are, and then number every box. Now, I get some pushback on this from different people. There's a few different theories out there, a few different myths, and a whole lot of opinions. But what I'm going to take you through in this episode is exactly what the facts are, what the truth is, and give you a whole lot of knowledge so that we can move through these things together. So I've got a little presentation for you, and we'll have a look at that, and we'll move through exactly how preferential voting works and why you should number every box. The first thing we need to know is that you should never just vote one. The real power to shape a democratic nation, state or city belongs to an educated majority of voters. Now, power doesn't belong to the politicians. Power doesn't belong to the Prime Minister or the Premier. Power belongs to the people, unless the people don't know how to wield that power. And that very much is the case with a majority of voters. And so that's exactly why we're doing this channel and having this chat, is to increase knowledge and bring the power back to the place that it should be residing, and that's in the votes of individual people. What a politician really wants is a longer career. That's a policy that most politicians share above any of their other policies. And there are certainly some with convictions that they will die for, politically speaking, and more power to them. I'd like politicians to just tell me exactly who they are, what their values are, and then let me vote for somebody like me in my values. However, what we are going to try and do is actually bring the power back to you so that we can give more volume to your voice and more influence to your vote through the electoral ballot system, through your ballot. Now, one of the myths that you will find around preferential voting is that you don't control your vote, that other people do sneaky backroom deals with preferences, and then they're going to end up controlling your vote somehow. That's a myth. Nobody chooses your preferences except for you. The only person filling in your ballot paper is the person holding the pencil in the box when you're in there, hopefully by yourself with nobody watching. It's you that fills in every box, nobody else. Nobody controls your vote. Second thing is helping the wrong candidate. One of the theories I've heard is that if you number every box, you might accidentally end up supporting and giving more power to the wrong candidate. I think people are under the impression that your vote gets divided up and like maybe 60% of it goes to one candidate and 30% of it goes to another candidate and 10% of it goes to another. It's not like that at all. We'll clear that up right a minute. It's impossible to help the wrong candidate. Another thing that people tell me is an opinion that they don't like preferential voting at all. They claim to understand it and say you actually get more than one vote with preferential voting, and it should be one man, one vote. Another person calls it double dipping. Another myth that I think reveals people who say that don't actually understand the system very well. And if they do, well, we disagree. I think it's the best system. So how many votes do you get on an optional preferential ballot paper? How many votes do you get if you number every box and there's 8 candidates? In Logan City, Queensland, at this election, there are 8 candidates on the ballot. If I number them top to bottom, 1 to 8, How many times is my vote going to be counted? Just one. Your ballot paper is your only vote. It doesn't matter if you vote just one or if you vote 1 to 8 or any number in between. Your ballot is only going to be counted once. What happens is that the ballot is actually moved from the smallest pile to the next preference that you've indicated if your ballot is eliminated. I just said that a little bit confusing. Let me say that again. The ballots in the smallest stack, let's say candidate number 6, or in this case, we're going to use 3 candidates. There's 3 candidates. Candidate number 1 has got 10% of the vote, candidate number 2's got 20% of the vote, and candidate number 3's got 40% of the vote. I don't know what happened to the rest, just bear with me. Candidate number 1 has got the least of any candidate, and so he's now eliminated from the counting. All the ballots in his stack are going to be looked at one by one, and people that counted for candidate number 1 as their second preference, they put a number 2 beside either candidate 2 or candidate 3, if they numbered every box. So those people that voted for candidate 2, their ballot will be added to pile number 2 for candidate number 2. Those people that voted candidate 3 as their second preference, their ballot will be added to the pile for candidate number 3. Your vote is moving. You're not getting new votes. You've only got one ballot paper. And so on. If there were more candidates, then constantly the smallest pile would be eliminated until there's only pile and then redistributed according to the person's next preference, and so on and so forth until there's only 2 stacks remaining. The only time that counting will end prematurely is when one of the candidates has got 50% of the vote plus 1, 50 or more percent of the votes. In that case, there's no need to keep counting because he's already, or she has already got the majority. Now, if you only voted for candidate number 1 and that candidate received the least votes, then when it comes time to choose where your vote is going to go to next, your one vote, where it's going to go to next, you've not numbered any other boxes. Your vote can't go anywhere else. Your vote doesn't move. Your vote gets wasted, or the right term is it gets exhausted. It will go on the record that you voted for that person, but you have no say in the final determination of who the candidates are. Now, in America, right now, they're voting for the new president, or they're choosing who the Democratic nominee will be. And what happens first is what's called the primaries. On election day, there will be 2 options. And out of those 2 options, everybody gets to pick one. But the primaries is where a huge field gets narrowed down to the final contender. We do this all on one day. It's called preferential voting. We say, okay, this is the order of people that I would like to see elected, or in reverse, this is the person I want the least, number 8, and then I'm going to go all the way through to number 1, and we're going to actually see who the final person standing is. Now, what I'm going to actually say is that preferential voting is a far more efficient system. You get an election that goes on for 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, instead of this 18-month nonsense that Americans do with their presidential election. I mean, what a waste of an election cycle. It's just huge. So this is actually really, really useful. But if you don't number any other boxes and your candidate gets eliminated early, you don't get to be part of the discussion going on from there. You don't get to decide between the final group or final 2 people who are standing. So ballots which have no preferences are easily exhausted, and that is a truly, sadly, wasted vote. Let me see now. Moving on. Complaint that I hear about preferential voting is that somebody might have gotten 40% of the vote and another person got 30% of the vote, but because there's another 30% of the vote that got distributed between those 2 people, the person with only 30% of the primary votes ends up being able to possibly beat, by accumulating more preferences, the person who got more primary votes. So shouldn't the person with the most primary votes win? Is it fair that somebody who came second or third or fourth in the first round of counting and didn't have more popularity in the primary vote, is it fair that they should win? Good question. So let's have a look at this hypothetical election. Let's say you've got 4 candidates, and one of them is from the Toyota party, one of them is from the Mazda party, one of them's from the Mitsubishi party, and one of them's from the Ducati party. Now, the candidates from the Toyota, Mazda, and Mitsubishi party have a lot of features that they're offering the voter in common. They seem to have policies which are better suited for a family, better suited for business purposes, better suited for health and safety. But then you've got the candidate from the Ducati party, and that candidate's a little bit more exciting. Got a good brand, good reputation. People might just like the color of that party a little bit better. But the fact is that it's not so good for business, it's not so good for family, and it's not so good for the safety of the community overall. Who exactly is going to be the person that receives the most votes? Well, in this election, hypothetical election, the Toyota candidate got 25% of the votes. The Mazda candidate got 23% of the votes. The Mitsubishi candidate got 22% of the votes. And on the basis of primary votes alone, the Ducati candidate got 30% of the votes. So in an election where it's first past the post, which means the person with the most votes, primary votes, wins, and there are no preferences considered at all, then all of the candidates which have the features of a sedan in common, they all lose. And the Ducati candidate, who is a moped, actually wins the election. But does that actually represent the will of the electorate? Does that represent the values, the desires, the needs of the candidate, of the electorate? Because 70% of the electorate wanted anybody but a moped. They wanted anything other than something which is not very safe, not very family friendly, and not at all useful for business unless you're an Uber Eats delivery driver. So what you can see here is that a preferential system means that the person who got eliminated first would have been the Mitsubishi candidate. The Mitsubishi candidate, the voters for the Mitsubishi, you would imagine that most of them would have gone on to preference either the Mazda or the Toyota candidate as their second preference. Some of them might have preferenced the exciting red Ducati, despite it not being all that it's cracked up to be. But some of them, I think most of them, would have voted for the candidate that looks the most similar to their first preference. So let's redistribute all those 22% of votes now to the 25 and the 23% candidates, Toyota and Mazda. One of them gets eliminated again. Again, there's a redistribution of those ballots in a preferential voting system. Some would go to Ducati, but you'd think most of them, again, would go to the other. Now, maybe the final contender is Toyota or Mazda. Maybe Mazda is the more popular second option for most people, and it's able to overtake the Toyota. The point is that roughly 70% of the electorate, 70% of the people voting, wanted the features and policies that most of the sedans had in common. The kind of policy set that they wanted, all of them wanted the least, was the moped, was the single seat, no safety, very limited business applicability candidate. That was their least option. And so if any of those 3 candidates that got less than the Ducati on the primary vote ends up winning, it actually keeps most of the electorate happy, 70% of the electorate happy, because somebody similar to the features and benefits in policies that they need actually got elected. For this reason, I think it's ridiculous to think that a plurality of votes or the first past the post system should actually win the election and somehow the electorate is ripped off if the Ducati doesn't win. I think that's absurd. The thing is, it's impossible to split the vote if you choose your own preferences. This is another myth that you get here thrown around, is that if you have too many candidates the same, it actually splits the vote. Well, that's the case in a first past the post system. That's the case if you only number one box. But if you number all your preferences, then you're going to actually see a majority of the votes is going to go to the candidates with the most similar features and policies that most of the electorate wants. So I think that's a really, really powerful and effective way to do it. So just finishing up. It's common to find a range of myths around preferential voting at election time, such as you don't control your vote. And again, of course you do. You're the one holding the pencil. When people hand out how to vote cards, those things are recommendations. There is no control over you, over who your vote goes to. You're the only one who controls your vote. You cannot help the wrong candidate, because if your candidate that you've wanted first is eliminated first, then you want to help another candidate. Of course you should help another candidate, one who's not like the candidate and policy set that you want the least. You want to help a candidate now who is more like your candidate than somebody else. And you get more than one vote, rubbish. Your vote just moves from candidate to candidate until the primary process is finished, and you get a full single vote out of the last two people standing, or until one candidate has 50% of the vote or more. So it's not double dipping. You're not getting more than one vote. Nobody's being disadvantaged. This is a system, if you use all of your preferences and don't waste your vote, this is a system that will make sure that most of the electorate gets the candidate that represents them best. This has been Pello Talk. I'm Dave Pello. I look forward to hearing your further questions and comments beneath this video. Thanks for watching.